Good evening and welcome back to another journey down the American highways. Tonight, we're rolling through Tennessee, a state that's always felt like the heart of the South to me, even though it stretches so far that its personality changes every 100 miles you drive. I've hauled loads through here more times than I can count, and every time I cross into this state, whether it's from Kentucky or Arkansas, Mississippi or Virginia, I know I'm entering somewhere special. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's talk about Tennessee. You know, there's something about Tennessee that makes it different from anywhere else in the country. Maybe it's because this state sits right in the middle of everything, a crossroads where the Deep South meets Appalachia, where the Mississippi River Delta touches the Great Smoky Mountains. When you're driving through Tennessee on one of those long hauls, you can feel the land changing beneath your wheels. The flat cotton fields of the west give way to rolling hills in the middle, and then those hills climb into mountains that'll test your brakes and your patience if you're not careful. It's like three different states crammed into one, and Tennesseans will tell you as much. They call them the three grand divisions: West Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, and East Tennessee. And folks in each region will swear their part is the best part. I remember the first time I drove through Tennessee, must have been nearly 30 years ago now. I was hauling furniture from North Carolina to Arkansas, taking Interstate 40 straight through the state. Back then, I was young and green, didn't know much about the places I was passing through. I just knew the road numbers and the truck stops where I could grab a hot meal and maybe catch a few hours of sleep. But somewhere between Nashville and Memphis, as the sun was setting and the radio was playing some old country song I can't remember anymore, I felt it. That feeling you get when you're not just driving through a place, but when a place starts to get into your bones. Tennessee has that quality. It seeps into you, slow and steady, like smoke from a Memphis barbecue pit or the fog that rolls down from the mountains in the east. Now, Tennessee's been part of the American story since before there was an America. The Cherokee people called these mountains and valleys home for thousands of years. They had a name for this land, Tanasi, which is where Tennessee got its name. It meant different things depending on who you asked, but it referred to a village along the Little Tennessee River. The Cherokee built their lives along these rivers, understanding what the first European settlers would eventually learn, that in this part of the world, rivers are everything. They're highways, they're borders, they're the lifeblood of commerce and survival. When those European settlers started arriving in the mid-1700s, they found a land that was beautiful and harsh in equal measure. The eastern mountains were thick with forests, steep hollows, and fast-moving streams. The middle of the state had rolling hills and fertile valleys. And out west, along the Mississippi River, the land was flat and rich, perfect for growing cotton, which would later shape so much of Tennessee's history, for better and for worse. The state became a territory in 1790, and by 1796, Tennessee was the 16th state to join the Union. It was the first state created from federal territory, and Tennesseans have always been proud of that pioneering spirit. The story of Tennessee is really the story of its rivers. I mean that. If you want to understand why cities grew where they did, why roads run the way they run, why this state matters so much to the story of American commerce, you have to understand the rivers. Three major river systems define Tennessee: the Mississippi, the Cumberland, and the Tennessee. And in a way, they're all connected, all part of the same vast network that once made the eastern half of North America navigable by boat. The Mississippi River forms most of Tennessee's western border, though over the years, as rivers do, it's changed course a few times. There are actually little pockets of Tennessee on the west side of the Mississippi now, left over from when the river decided to take a different path. The Mississippi was the superhighway of the 19th century. Before railroads, before interstates, if you wanted to move goods from the interior of the country down to New Orleans and out to the world, you put them on a flatboat or a steamboat and sent them down the Mississippi. And Memphis, sitting high on the bluffs overlooking that mighty river, became one of the most important ports in the South. I've driven into Memphis hundreds of times, usually crossing the Hernando de Soto Bridge on Interstate 40, that big steel arch bridge they sometimes call the M Bridge. It's an impressive sight, especially at night when it's all lit up, and you're coming from Arkansas, looking at the lights of Memphis spread out on the eastern shore. That bridge opened in 1973, connecting Memphis to West Memphis, Arkansas. But before that bridge, before the interstate system, there were ferries, and before the ferries, there were just the boats on the river and the people who made their living from it. Memphis is a river city through and through. It grew because of that location, sitting on the Fourth Chickasaw Bluff, high enough to avoid most floods, close enough to the river to benefit from all that commerce flowing past. In the 1800s, Memphis became a cotton market, a place where planters from the Delta brought their crops to be sold and shipped. Steamboats lined the docks, their whistles echoing across the water. The city grew wealthy on cotton, built grand buildings and wide streets, and became a cultural center. But with that wealth came tragedy. Yellow fever epidemics hit Memphis hard in the 1870s, especially 1878, when thousands died and the city lost its charter. The population dropped from 40,000 to just over 19,000. It was a dark time, and Memphis had to rebuild itself from almost nothing. But Memphis did rebuild, and it did so on the strength of its people and its music. Because if Memphis is known for anything today, it's the music. This is where the blues became the blues. Up and down Beale Street, in clubs and juke joints and on street corners, black musicians took the pain and joy of their lives and turned it into something that would change American culture forever. William Christopher Handy, a man they call the father of the blues, made Memphis his home in the early 1900s. He wrote Memphis Blues in 1912 and Beale Street Blues in 1916. Those songs put Beale Street on the map and helped define a genre that would influence everything from jazz to rock and roll. Beale Street itself is only a few blocks long in downtown Memphis, but what a few blocks they are. Back in its heyday from the 1920s through the 40s, Beale Street was jumping every night. Louis Armstrong played there. Muddy Waters, B.B. King, Memphis Minnie, Albert King. B.B. King even called himself the Beale Street Blues Boy before he shortened it to just B.B. King. These weren't just musicians. They were innovators, people who took traditional forms and made something entirely new. The Memphis Blues had a sound all its own, grittier and more urban than Delta blues, but still rooted in that same deep well of human experience. Now, Beale Street fell on hard times in the 60s and 70s. Urban renewal projects and the general decline of downtown areas across America left it nearly abandoned. But in the 1980s and 90s, there was a push to revitalize the area, and today Beale Street is a major tourist attraction. You can walk those same sidewalks where legends once played, duck into clubs that still have live music every night of the week, and eat some of the best barbecue you'll find anywhere. And speaking of barbecue, we need to talk about Memphis barbecue because it's not just food here, it's a religion. Memphis-style barbecue is all about the pork, specifically ribs and pulled pork shoulder. They smoke it low and slow over hickory wood, and they have two main styles, dry rub and wet. The dry rub is what Memphis is most famous for. They coat the ribs in a mixture of spices, paprika, garlic powder, black pepper, cayenne, and others, and the meat cooks in its own juices, developing this incredible crust. You bite into a dry-rubbed rib from somewhere like Charlie Virgo's Rendezvous, and it's like tasting history. The wet style, on the other hand, gets basted with a tomato-based sauce that's tangy and sweet and a little spicy. Both are incredible, and people will argue until they're blue in the face about which is better. I've stopped at more Memphis barbecue joints than I can count, and I've never had a bad meal. There's something about that combination of smoke and spice, the way the meat falls off the bone, the way it pairs with coleslaw and baked beans and white bread. It's comfort food that transcends comfort. It's art. And when you're driving a truck, putting in 12-hour days, eating at rest stops and truck plazas most of the time, a good barbecue meal in Memphis feels like a gift. Now, if you're heading east on Interstate 40 from Memphis, you've got about 200 miles ahead of you before you hit Nashville. It's a pretty drive, especially in spring when everything's green and blooming. You pass through Jackson, a city that's seen its share of history, from Civil War battles to being a railroad hub. The interstate cuts through farmland and small towns, places where life moves at a different pace than in the cities. Every now and then, you'll see an old barn with "Sea Rock City" painted on the roof, advertising that famous tourist attraction up on Lookout Mountain in Chattanooga. Those barns used to be everywhere, part of a marketing campaign that started in the 1930s. Most of them are gone now, but a few remain, fading reminders of how people used to travel before the interstate system made everything faster. Around mile marker 190, you start getting into the Nashville area. The traffic picks up, especially during rush hour, and you can feel the energy of the city even before you see the skyline. Nashville sits right in the heart of Tennessee, where the Cumberland River makes a big bend. That river was Nashville's lifeline for a long time, the reason the city exists at all. The Cumberland flows almost 700 miles from its headwaters in Kentucky down to where it joins the Ohio River. For most of its length, it's navigable, which meant that in the 1800s, you could load up a flatboat in Nashville with tobacco, cotton, corn, whiskey, whatever you were selling, and float it down the Cumberland to the Ohio, then down the Ohio to the Mississippi, and down the Mississippi to New Orleans. It might take weeks or even months, but it connected Nashville to the world. That river commerce made Nashville wealthy. The city became a trading center, a place where goods from Middle Tennessee and Kentucky came to be shipped out. Steamboats arrived in Nashville in 1819, and the city boomed. Grand homes were built, businesses flourished, and Nashville became known as a place of culture and education. Vanderbilt University was founded there in 1873, and Fisk University, one of the oldest historically black universities in the country, was established in 1866. Nashville was becoming something more than just a river town. It was becoming a capital in every sense of the word. But what really made Nashville famous was the music. Country music, to be specific, though Nashville's music scene encompasses a lot more than just country these days. The story of Nashville as Music City really begins with the Grand Ole Opry. Back in 1925, a local insurance company started a radio station called WSM, We Shield Millions, broadcasting from the 5th floor of their office building. They hired a program director named George D. Hay, who had previously worked on a similar show in Chicago. On November 28, 1925, Hay introduced a show called the WSM Barn Dance, featuring old-time fiddle music and string bands. It was supposed to be just one segment, but it was so popular that it became a weekly program. In December of 1927, the show got its famous name. After a broadcast of classical music, Hay came on the air and said, "For the past hour we have been listening to the music taken largely from the Grand Opera, but from now on we will present the Grand Ole Opry." The name stuck. For the next few decades, the Grand Ole Opry became the place where country music stars were made. If you played the Opry, you'd made it. It moved to different venues over the years, eventually landing at the Ryman Auditorium in downtown Nashville in 1943. The Ryman was originally built in 1892 as a religious meeting hall, but it had great acoustics, and it became the perfect home for the Opry. For the next 31 years, every Saturday night, the Opry broadcast from the Ryman. Hank Williams made his debut there. Patsy Cline, Loretta Lynn, Dolly Parton, Johnny Cash, all of them walked across that stage and stood in what's now called the Circle, a piece of wood from the original Ryman stage that's been incorporated into the stage of every Opry venue since. In 1974, the Opry moved to a new building out at Opryland, a theme park that was supposed to be Nashville's answer to Disneyland. The theme park is gone now, replaced by the Opry Mills shopping mall, but the Grand Ole Opry house is still there, still hosting shows every week. Nashville's music scene exploded in the mid-20th century. Record labels, publishing houses, recording studios, they all set up shop in Nashville. Music Row became the center of the country music industry. Musicians from all over the world came to Nashville to make it big, and some of them did. The city's population grew, and its economy diversified beyond just music and agriculture. Healthcare became a major industry, with Hospital Corporation of America and other companies headquartered there. Insurance, banking, education, all of it contributed to Nashville's growth. By the late 20th century, Nashville was one of the fastest-growing cities in the South. And then there's the food. Nashville has its own signature dish, and it's not for the faint of heart. Nashville hot chicken is a fried chicken dish that'll set your mouth on fire and make you come back for more. The story goes that back in the 1930s, a man named Thornton Prince was a bit of a ladies' man, and one of his girlfriends decided to teach him a lesson. She fried up some chicken and coated it in a bunch of cayenne pepper, hoping it would be too hot for him to eat. Instead, Prince loved it. He and his brothers opened a restaurant called the Barbecue Chicken Shack, and hot chicken became a Nashville institution. Hot chicken is traditionally made by coating fried chicken in a paste made from cayenne pepper and lard, with the heat level ranging from mild to extra hot. It's served on white bread with pickles, which help cut the heat. Prince's Hot Chicken Shack is still around, now run by Thornton's great niece, and it's considered by many to be the best place to get authentic hot chicken. But there are dozens of other places in Nashville serving their own versions, from Hattie B's to Bolton's to Pepperfire. The dish has become so popular that there's even a hot chicken festival every 4th of July. Nashville sits at an interesting spot on the map for truckers. It's one of only 4 cities in the United States where 3 major interstates converge. Interstate 40 running east-west, Interstate 65 running north-south, and Interstate 24 cutting southeast toward Chattanooga and Knoxville. That makes Nashville a major logistics hub. Distribution centers, warehouses, freight companies, they're all over the place. If you're hauling freight in the southeast, there's a good chance you're going through Nashville at some point. Speaking of interstates, we should talk about Tennessee's highway system, because it's been crucial to the state's development. Tennessee has over 1,200 miles of interstate highways, which is a lot for a state its size. The interstate system was created by the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956, signed by President Eisenhower. But one of the key architects of that legislation was Senator Albert Gore, S.R., from Tennessee. Gore served in the Senate from 1953 to 1971. And he was chairman of the subcommittee that helped shape the Interstate Highway Bill. In honor of his work, all the interstates in Tennessee are designated the Senator Albert Gore, S.R. Memorial Interstate System. Interstate 40 is the big one in Tennessee. It's the 3rd longest interstate in the country, running from Wilmington, North Carolina, all the way to Barstow, California, over 2,600 miles. In Tennessee, it stretches 455 miles from the North Carolina border in the east to the Arkansas border in the west, passing through Knoxville, Nashville, and Memphis. It's the longest segment of I-40 in any state. For truckers, I-40 is a workhorse. It carries an enormous amount of freight, connecting the East Coast to the Southwest. The section of I-40 between Nashville and Memphis was the first segment completed between 2 major cities in Tennessee, back in 1966. Interstate 65 runs north-south through the state, connecting Nashville to Louisville, Kentucky, in the north and Birmingham, Alabama, in the south. Interstate 24 connects Nashville to Chattanooga and then continues northwest to Illinois. Interstate 75 is another major north-south route, running through Knoxville and Chattanooga on its way from Michigan to Florida. These interstates form the backbone of Tennessee's economy. They allow goods to move quickly and efficiently, they connect cities and towns, and they've changed the landscape of the state in profound ways. Before the interstates, there were the old highways. U.S. Route 70, for instance, was the main east-west route through Tennessee for decades before I-40 was built. It followed much of the same path, connecting Memphis to Nashville to Knoxville. Back in the early 20th century, there was a movement to create a system of named highways, routes that would span multiple states and have catchy names to help promote them. The Dixie Highway was one of the most famous. It ran from Michigan to Florida, passing through Tennessee. The route was divided into eastern and western branches, both of which came through Chattanooga, which became the national headquarters for the Dixie Highway Association in 1915. Chattanooga is a fascinating city, and it's my next stop on this journey through Tennessee. It sits in the southeastern corner of the state, where the Tennessee River cuts through a gap in the mountains. Lookout Mountain looms over the city to the south, and Missionary Ridge rises to the east. Those geographic features made Chattanooga strategically important during the Civil War, and the battles fought there in 1863 were some of the most significant of the entire conflict. By the fall of 1863, the Civil War had been raging for 2.5 years. In the Western Theater, Union and Confederate forces had been battling for control of key cities and transportation routes. Chattanooga was crucial because it was a railroad hub, a place where multiple rail lines converged. Whoever controlled Chattanooga could control the movement of troops and supplies throughout the region. In September of 1863, after a disastrous defeat at the Battle of Chickamauga, just south of the city, Union forces under General William Rosecrans retreated to Chattanooga and dug in. Confederate General Braxton Bragg followed and established positions on Lookout Mountain and Missionary Ridge, effectively putting the Union Army under siege. The Union troops in Chattanooga were in bad shape. Their supply lines were cut and they were running out of food. Men and animals were starving. But in late October, General Ulysses S. Grant arrived to take command. Grant was already a rising star in the Union Army, having won important victories at Vicksburg and elsewhere. He immediately set about opening a new supply line, called the Cracker Line, because of the hardtack biscuits that were a staple of soldier rations. On October 27th, Union forces launched a surprise attack at Brown's Ferry, west of the city, and succeeded in establishing a route for supplies to flow in. The siege was effectively broken. On November 24th, Union forces under General Joseph Hooker attacked Confederate positions on Lookout Mountain. It was a foggy day, and the battle became known as the Battle Above the Clouds because the fighting took place at such a high elevation, shrouded in mist. Hooker's forces drove the Confederates off the mountain, securing the Union's left flank. The next day, November 25th, came the Battle of Missionary Ridge. Grant's plan was for General William Tecumseh Sherman to attack the Confederate right while Hooker attacked the left, with the center holding firm. But Sherman's attack stalled and Hooker was delayed. In the center, Union troops were ordered to take the rifle pits at the base of Missionary Ridge and then stop. But once they'd taken the pits, they didn't stop. They kept going, charging up the ridge in what became one of the most dramatic assaults of the war. No one really knows why they did it. Some say it was because they were taking fire from Confederate positions higher up and had no choice but to keep advancing. Others say it was pure adrenaline and momentum. Whatever the reason, they reached the top of Missionary Ridge and broke the Confederate line. Bragg's army retreated, and the Union controlled Chattanooga. It was a turning point in the war. With Chattanooga secured, Sherman was able to launch his Atlanta campaign the following spring, which eventually led to his famous March to the Sea and hastened the end of the Confederacy. Today, you can visit the Chickamauga and Chattanooga National Military Park, which preserves the battlefields. Standing on Lookout Mountain or Missionary Ridge, looking out over the city and the river, you can almost imagine what those soldiers saw and felt. It's humbling. Chattanooga has done a remarkable job of preserving its history while also moving forward. The city went through tough times in the mid-20th century, dealing with pollution and economic decline. But in the 1990s and 2000s, Chattanooga reinvented itself. It cleaned up the river, invested in parks and public spaces, and became known as a tech hub with the fastest municipal internet speeds in the country at one point. Now it's a vibrant city with a thriving downtown, and it's a great place to stop if you're driving through on Interstate 24. Heading east from Chattanooga, you start climbing into the mountains. The road gets steeper, the curves get tighter, and if you're pulling a load, you've got to pay attention. This is the edge of the Appalachian Mountains, and the Great Smoky Mountains are just ahead. The Smokies are a subrange of the Appalachians, running along the Tennessee-North Carolina border. They're called the Smokies because of the blue-gray mist that often hangs over them, created by moisture and organic compounds released by the dense forests. The Cherokee people lived in these mountains for thousands of years. They called them Shacknage, the place of blue smoke. The Cherokee had towns and villages throughout the region, particularly in the river valleys. They hunted, fished, farmed, and traded with other tribes. Their society was matrilineal, meaning descent and inheritance were traced through the mother's line. They had a written language, developed by a man named Sequoyah in the early 1800s, and they published their own newspaper, the Cherokee Phoenix. But in the 1830s, the U.S. government forced most of the Cherokee to leave their homeland and move west to what is now Oklahoma. It was part of the Indian Removal Act, and the journey became known as the Trail of Tears because thousands died along the way from disease, starvation, and exposure. However, not all the Cherokee left. Some hid in the mountains, evading the soldiers. Others, led by a man named Solly, resisted. Solly and his followers were eventually captured, and Solly was executed, but his sacrifice allowed some Cherokee families to stay. Today, the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians lives on the Qualla boundary in North Carolina, just south of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The park itself was established in 1934, though the process of creating it was long and complicated. Unlike many Western national parks, which were created on land already owned by the federal government, the Smokies were a patchwork of private property. Logging companies owned much of the land, and there were hundreds of small farms and communities scattered throughout the mountains. The Park Commission had to buy the land piece by piece, sometimes using eminent domain to force people to sell. It was controversial, and many families resented being removed from land they'd lived on for generations. But the park was created, and President Franklin D. Roosevelt dedicated it at a ceremony at Newfound Gap in September of 1940. Today, the Great Smoky Mountains National Park is the most visited national park in the United States. It gets over 12 million visitors a year, more than twice as many as the Grand Canyon. Part of the reason is accessibility. The park straddles two states, Tennessee and North Carolina, and it's within a day's drive of major population centers in the southeast. But the main reason is beauty. The Smokies are stunning. Old-growth forests, cascading waterfalls, wildflowers in the spring, brilliant foliage in the fall. The park preserves over 800 square miles of wilderness, and there are over 800 miles of trails for hiking. The main road through the park is U.S. Route 441, also called Newfound Gap Road. It runs from Gatlinburg, Tennessee, to Cherokee, North Carolina, crossing the mountains at Newfound Gap, which sits at an elevation of just over 5,000 feet. The road climbs through deciduous forests in the lower elevations, transitions to spruce fir forests higher up, and offers incredible views at every turn. There are pullouts and overlooks where you can stop and take in the scenery, and if you're lucky, you might see wildlife. Black bears, white-tailed deer, wild turkeys, salamanders. The Smokies have more salamander species than anywhere else in the world, which is a fact I find oddly charming. Gatlinburg, the town at the northern entrance to the park, has become a major tourist destination. It's full of hotels, restaurants, gift shops, and attractions like Ripley's Aquarium and various museums. It can get crowded, especially in summer and during fall foliage season, but it's also a gateway to some of the most beautiful natural scenery in the eastern United States. Pigeon Forge, just a few miles north of Gatlinburg, is home to Dollywood, the theme park owned by Dolly Parton. Dolly is from nearby Sevier County, and she's never forgotten her roots. She's invested millions in the area and she's beloved there. Driving through East Tennessee, whether you're on the interstate or on back roads, you're in Appalachian country. This is a region with its own culture, its own history, its own way of doing things. The people here are often described as independent, resourceful, and deeply connected to the land. Music is a huge part of the culture, from old-time string band music to bluegrass to country. Food traditions run deep too. Cornbread, soup beans, fried apples, stacked cake, biscuits and gravy, country ham. It's simple food, but it's good, and it tells a story about people making do with what they had. The Appalachian region, including East Tennessee, was often isolated because of the mountains. Roads were poor, and travel was difficult. That isolation meant communities were tight-knit and traditions were preserved. But it also meant poverty. The region struggled economically, especially as coal mining declined and manufacturing jobs left. Even today, parts of Appalachia face challenges with unemployment, healthcare access, and education. But there's also resilience here, a determination to keep going, to preserve what's valuable about the past while finding a way forward. One thing I've learned from driving through Tennessee so many times is that food is a thread that ties the whole state together. Every region has its specialties, its dishes that people are passionate about. We've talked about Memphis barbecue and Nashville hot chicken, but there's so much more. In East Tennessee, you'll find country ham, which is salt-cured and aged, giving it an intense, salty flavor. It's traditionally served with red-eye gravy, which is made by deglazing the pan with coffee. It sounds strange, but it's delicious, especially with biscuits. Tennessee is also whiskey country. Lynchburg, a tiny town in Moore County, is home to the Jack Daniel's distillery, which has been making Tennessee whiskey since 1866. The distillery is the oldest registered distillery in the United States, and it's a major tourist attraction. Tennessee whiskey is similar to bourbon, but it goes through an extra step called the Lincoln County process, where the whiskey is filtered through charcoal made from sugar maple trees. This gives it a smoother flavor. Jack Daniel's is known worldwide, and it's become synonymous with Tennessee. And then there's the meat and three tradition. A meat and three is a type of restaurant common in the South, where you choose one meat, usually fried chicken, pork chops, meatloaf, or catfish, and three sides from a list that might include mashed potatoes, green beans, macaroni and cheese, fried okra, coleslaw, cornbread, and so on. It's home cooking, served cafeteria style, and it's a great way to experience Southern food. There are meat and three restaurants all over Tennessee, and they're the kind of places where locals eat lunch every day. Driving through Tennessee, I've stopped at countless diners, truck stops, barbecue joints, and roadside stands. I've had catfish fried to perfection at a place in Jackson. I've eaten hot chicken at 3 in the morning in Nashville after unloading a truck. I've pulled off the highway at some little town I'd never heard of and found a meat and three serving food that tasted like somebody's grandmother made it. These are the experiences that make this job more than just a job. It's about the people you meet, the places you discover, the stories you hear. Tennessee has over 95 counties, and over a third of them have direct access to an interstate highway. That's a higher percentage than most states, and it's one reason Tennessee ranks 6th in the nation in cargo carried by trucks. The state's central location, combined with its well-developed infrastructure, makes it a natural hub for distribution and logistics. Companies like FedEx, which is headquartered in Memphis, and UPS, which has a major presence in Nashville, employ tens of thousands of people in Tennessee. The trucking industry is vital to the state's economy. But beyond the interstates and the big cities, Tennessee is full of small towns with their own stories. Places like Jonesboro, the oldest town in Tennessee, founded in 1779. It's the birthplace of the National Storytelling Festival, which has been held every October since 1973. Or Franklin, just south of Nashville, which was the site of one of the bloodiest battles of the Civil War. Or Lynchburg, which we mentioned earlier, where the population is only about 6,000 but millions of people know the name because of Jack Daniels. Or Bristol, straddling the Tennessee-Virginia border, which calls itself the birthplace of country music because of a series of recording sessions held there in 1927. These towns have main streets with brick buildings that have been standing for a century or more. They have local diners where everyone knows everyone. They have stories that go back generations, stories about floods and fires and famous visitors and local characters who did something remarkable. And they have people who are proud of where they're from, who have stayed when they could have left, who have kept businesses going through tough times, who have raised families and built lives in places that don't make the national news but matter just as much. I think that's what I appreciate most about Tennessee. It's not just Nashville and Memphis, though those cities are incredible. It's not just the Smokies, though they're breathtaking. It's the whole tapestry, the way history and music and food and landscape all weave together into something unique. When you drive through Tennessee, you're not just passing through a state. You're traveling through a story that's been unfolding for centuries, a story that's still being written. The roads themselves tell stories. Interstate 40, for example, was supposed to run through Overton Park in Memphis, right through the middle of a beloved public space that included a zoo and an old-growth forest. But in the 1960s and 70s, a group of citizens fought back. They went all the way to the Supreme Court and won, in a case called Citizens to Preserve Overton Park v. Volpe. The interstate was rerouted, and Overton Park was saved. It's a reminder that progress isn't always straightforward, that sometimes communities have to stand up for what they value. Or consider the Natchez Trace Parkway, which runs from Nashville to Natchez, Mississippi. It follows the route of an old trail that Native Americans used for centuries, and that later became a path for settlers and traders traveling between the Mississippi River and Tennessee. In the early 1800s, flatboatmen would float goods down the rivers to Natchez or New Orleans, sell everything including the boats, and then walk or ride back home along the Natchez Trace. It was dangerous, full of bandits and wild animals, but it was also an important connection between regions. Today, the parkway is a scenic drive, maintained by the National Park Service, and it's a beautiful alternative to the interstate if you have the time. Tennessee's history is complicated, like any state's history. It was a slave state, and it was the last state to secede from the Union during the Civil War, though many Tennesseans fought for the Union. The state saw more battles than any other except Virginia. After the war, Reconstruction was difficult, and the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, which was founded in Pulaski, Tennessee, in 1865, cast a long shadow. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s was hard fought in Tennessee, with sit-ins and marches and struggles for desegregation. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was in Memphis supporting striking sanitation workers when he was assassinated at the Lorraine Motel in April of 1968. That motel is now the National Civil Rights Museum, and it's a powerful place to visit, a place that forces you to reckon with the past and think about what we still need to do to make things right. But Tennessee has also produced incredible leaders, artists, and thinkers. Andrew Jackson, the 7th president, was from Tennessee. So was James K. Polk, the 11th president. Davy Crockett, the frontiersman and politician, was from Tennessee. In music, the list is almost endless. Elvis Presley, Dolly Parton, Johnny Cash, Aretha Franklin, Tina Turner, Kenny Chesney, Taylor Swift, and so many others. In literature, there's Alex Haley, author of Roots, and Cormac McCarthy and Nikki Giovanni. In civil rights, there's Ida B. Wells, who was born into slavery in Mississippi but did much of her anti-lynching work in Memphis. Tennessee's contributions to American culture are profound. As I'm driving through Tennessee, whether I'm hauling electronics from Nashville to Atlanta or furniture from North Carolina to Memphis, I'm always aware that I'm traveling through a place that matters. The highways I drive on were built through the hard work of thousands of people. The cities I pass through have been shaped by centuries of history. The food I eat, the music I hear on the radio, the accents I hear when I stop for coffee, they're all part of a living culture that's constantly evolving but never forgets where it came from. And the thing is, Tennessee keeps growing and changing. Nashville's population has exploded in the past couple of decades. It's become a hot spot for young professionals, musicians, entrepreneurs. The city's skyline is dotted with cranes, and neighborhoods that were sleepy 20 years ago are now full of condos and restaurants and shops. Memphis is working to revitalize downtown and riverfront areas, trying to attract new businesses and residents. Chattanooga, as I mentioned, has become a tech hub. Even smaller cities like Knoxville and Murfreesboro are growing. But with that growth come challenges. Housing prices are rising, and longtime residents are being priced out of neighborhoods. Traffic is getting worse, especially around Nashville. The character of places is changing, and not everyone is happy about it. There's tension between preserving what's valuable about Tennessee's past and embracing the opportunities that come with growth and change. It's a tension that every place faces, but it feels particularly acute in Tennessee because the state's identity is so tied up with its history and traditions. Still, I'm optimistic. Tennessee has faced challenges before, from yellow fever epidemics to economic depressions to civil rights struggles, and it's come through them. The people here are resilient. They care about their communities. They remember their history, even when it's painful, and they're willing to work to build something better. As the miles roll by and the sun starts to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, I think about all the times I've driven this route, all the loads I've hauled, all the conversations I've had at truck stops and diners. I think about the farmer in West Tennessee who told me about the year the Mississippi flooded and how his family rebuilt. I think about the waitress in Nashville who recommended her favorite hot chicken place and laughed when I asked for mild because she knew I'd be back for something hotter. I think about the park ranger at the Smokies who pointed out a black bear on the side of the road and reminded me to keep my distance. I think about the mechanic in Chattanooga who helped me fix a tire on a Sunday afternoon when most places were closed. These are the moments that stick with me, the human connections that happen when you're out on the road. Tennessee is a state of roads and rivers, mountains and music, barbecue and blues, history and hope. It's a place where the past is always present, where you can feel the echoes of the people who came before, but where the future is being built every day. If you've never been to Tennessee, I hope you get the chance to visit. Drive through on Interstate 40 or take the back roads. Stop in Memphis and walk down Beale Street, eat some barbecue, visit Sun's studio where Elvis recorded. Spend a day in Nashville, catch a show at the Ryman or the Bluebird Cafe, eat hot chicken, walk through Music Row. Head east to the Smokies, hike a trail, breathe in the mountain air, stand at Newfound Gap and look out at ridge after ridge disappearing into the mist. Stop in Chattanooga and visit Rock City or take the incline railway up Lookout Mountain. Explore the small towns, talk to the people, listen to their stories. And if you're a fellow trucker, you already know what I'm talking about. You've driven these roads, you've seen these places, you've experienced the unique rhythm of Tennessee. You know how it feels to cross the Mississippi into Memphis at sunrise, the river glowing gold in the early light. You know the relief of finally reaching Nashville after a long haul, the city lights welcoming you. You know the challenge of those mountain grades in the east, the satisfaction of reaching the top and starting the descent. You know that Tennessee is more than just a place you pass through. It's a place that gets into your soul. So here's to Tennessee, to its rivers and roads, its music and mountains, its past and its future. Here's to the people who make this state what it is. The musicians and cooks, the farmers and truckers, the teachers and nurses, the people who show up every day and do the work. Here's to the stories that have been told and the stories yet to come. And as always, thank you for riding along with me tonight. If you've enjoyed this journey through Tennessee, I hope you'll join me next time as we head down another American highway, exploring another state, another story. There's always another road ahead, another place to discover, another chapter in the great American story. Until then, keep the rubber side down and the shiny side up. Safe travels, friends, and I'll see you down the road.